As artists, we're often encouraged to chase bigger, more detailed, more impressive pieces. But some of the most valuable practice comes from slowing down and creating something simple, not because it's easier, but because it gives you the chance to focus on atmosphere, composition, values, and simply enjoying the process. Some days I enjoy spending hours rendering every tiny detail. Other days I just want to create something atmospheric without chasing perfection. And today is one of those days. So, let's create a simple moonlit fantasy landscape using a traditional graphite workflow in Photoshop. The first thing I always establish is the overall atmosphere of the drawing. Using a graphite powder brush, I block in the entire sky with a single value. At this stage, I'm not concerned with details or texture. I'm simply creating the foundation that everything else will build upon. To keep the edges clean, I make a selection around the mountain before shading it. Selections aren't there to replace drawing. They simply allow me to focus on one form at a time without worrying about affecting the surrounding areas. Because the mountain needs to feel heavier than the sky, I gradually increase the value by controlling the pressure of the brush instead of trying to reach the darkest tone immediately. I continue using exactly the same process throughout the entire drawing. Block the large masses, make selections where they're needed, then gradually build the values. At this stage, I'm not really thinking about mountains, clouds, or buildings. I'm simply organizing the composition into large relationships of light and shadow. Once those relationships are established, everything else becomes refinement. With the foundation in place, I can begin strengthening the darker tones throughout the composition. Instead of finishing one area completely before moving to the next, I slowly work across the entire drawing, layering graphite wherever it feels necessary. Building values gradually gives me much more control and helps the whole composition develop together. Once the darker structure feels balanced, I return to the moon. You'll notice that I've intentionally left it untouched from the very beginning. Rather than trying to paint around it, it's much easier to preserve that bright area from the start. Using a circular selection together with the fine details eraser, I remove the graphite completely, creating a perfectly clean moon. One of my favorite things about graphite is that light isn't something you add, it's something you reveal. Now it's time to establish the light source. Using the kneaded eraser, I begin gently lifting graphite around the moon. Unlike the fine details eraser, the kneaded eraser removes graphite very gradually, making it perfect for creating soft transitions and subtle glows. This immediately begins creating the illusion of moonlight spreading through the sky. After lifting those lighter values, I blend everything softly. The goal isn't to blur the drawing, it's simply to soften the transition between the lifted graphite and the darker sky. Once the larger glow feels natural, I switch back to the fine details eraser. Lowering its opacity slightly allows me to build highlights gradually across the tops of the clouds instead of creating bright white marks. Then I blend once again, especially underneath those highlights, gently pulling them back into the darker areas of the clouds. Those small transitions are what make the atmosphere feel believable. Rather than outlining every cloud, I want the light to appear and disappear naturally across the landscape. With the clouds established, I begin working my way down the mountain. Just like before, I'm lifting graphite with the kneaded eraser instead of painting highlights directly. Keeping the opacity slightly lower allows me to slowly build the reflected moonlight across the surface of the rock. After each pass, I soften everything again using the blending brush. Once the mountain begins catching the moonlight, I return to the fog. Using the kneaded eraser again, I carve soft cloud shapes throughout the landscape. Rather than thinking about individual clouds, I imagine one continuous layer of mist flowing around the mountain. That keeps everything connected and helps the atmosphere feel natural. At the same time, I continue strengthening the darker values beneath the fog. Sometimes the best way to make something appear brighter isn't by making it lighter, it's by carefully darkening what's around it. The relationship between those values is what creates the illusion of glowing light. Throughout this stage, I continue alternating between adding graphite, lifting graphite, and blending until the entire landscape feels soft and unified. With the atmosphere in place, it's time for the final focal point, the city hidden beneath the mountain. Once again, I begin by lifting graphite using the kneaded eraser. This creates a soft opening in the fog where the city will exist. After that, I use the fine details eraser to introduce small points of light throughout the scene. At this distance, I'm not trying to draw individual buildings, I'm simply suggesting them. A few tiny lights, a few vertical shapes. That's often enough for the brain to complete the illusion. To create those distant structures, I switch to the 7B graphite pencil, placing small dark marks throughout the illuminated area. Then I return once more with the fine details eraser to recover a few brighter highlights before making the final adjustments, using the soft shading brush and the blending brush. Most finished drawings aren't transformed by one dramatic change. They're completed through dozens of small decisions that slowly bring everything together. And that's the finished drawing. What I enjoy most about pieces like this isn't the level of detail. It's the freedom they give you to focus on the feeling of a place rather than every individual object inside it. Sometimes slowing down and creating something simple can teach you just as much as spending days on a highly detailed illustration. This artwork was created entirely using the Graphite Library Photoshop brushes by Granci Studios, designed to recreate a traditional graphite workflow inside Adobe Photoshop. If you'd like to try the brushes yourself, you'll find them through the links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more traditional drawing techniques, digital graphite workflows, and fantasy art.